Welcome to the deep dive. We've taken all the sources you sent our way, the articles, the summaries, the deep dives from reading communities, and we've synthesized them into an essential understanding of a book that has, well, challenged and provoked readers for over 60 years. Anthony Burgess's A Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, we're jumping right into some pretty uncomfortable territory here. This is a look at a futuristic society, a really dark mirror of our own that's just plagued by youth violence.
And the main character, Alex, he's our narrator.
Yeah.
The ultimate unreliable narrator, I'd say. A hyper-violent teenage gang leader whose voice and worldview just shapes every single word.
Absolutely.
So our mission today isn't just a simple plot summary. We're going to give you a clear outline of Alex's journey, for sure, but more importantly, we're going to compare the two controversial versions of the book.
Because the version you read changes everything.
It really does. And then we'll get into the two major, almost warring opinions we found online about the book's depth versus its really challenging style.
And that all boils down to this one really disturbing philosophical question the book forces on you. If the government forces someone to be good, if it strips them of the choice to be evil, does that destroy their humanity?
That is the question, isn't it? Okay, let's unpack that with the title itself, the clockwork analogy. The book summarizes Alex's transformation after he's imprisoned and gets this infamous Ludovico treatment. The whole point is to turn him into a clockwork orange.
It's such a precise and honestly a chilling term.
Yeah.
Think of an orange. It's organic, it's alive, it has the capacity for choice, but then you wind it up with mechanical gears.
Like a toy.
Exactly. Alex is turned into a mechanical human without any capacity for real moral choice. He's forced onto a path of goodness. But it's just a physical aversion. It's not a real ethical change.
So he's not choosing to be good. He's programmed to physically avoid being bad. You can see the ethical problem right away.
And that leads to something that surprises a lot of people, especially if you've only seen the movie. We have to talk about maturity and the two different versions of the book. The original, complete edition, is in 3 parts, each with 7 chapters, 21 chapters total.
Right, but the key detail, and the sources make this so clear, is that the American version, for decades, it just omitted the final chapter. Chapter 21 was just gone.
And that omission fundamentally changes the entire meaning of the novel. The 20-chapter version basically ends with Alex as this reformed sociopath, but you're left wondering if he'll just go back to his old ways. It's very open-ended.
But the full version?
The full 21-chapter version pushes Alex towards genuine maturity, a voluntary rejection of violence. It shifts the whole conclusion from this kind of tragedy to, well, something more like human development. It's a coming-of-age story, not a tragedy of conditioning.
That is wild. I mean, why would a publisher just chop off the ending that completely changes the philosophical point of the book?
Well, Burgess himself said he felt kind of forced into it by his U.S. editor. He regretted it. He said that last chapter was absolutely essential because he saw the story as a journey, from adolescence through all this error to adulthood.
So cutting the end just makes it a story about enforced behavior.
Exactly. Not a story about moral evolution.
Okay, we can't talk about reading this book without hitting the biggest hurdle for a lot of people. The language, Nadette. Is it like genuine immersion or is it just an obstacle?
It's the defining feature of the book style, for sure. The whole thing is narrated by Alex and Nadette, which is this dense, invented slang. It's a mix of Russian words like horror show for good or droog for friend.
And English, and just made-up slang. As a reader, you're literally forced to learn a new language on the fly. But does that really serve a purpose beyond just, creating an atmosphere?
Oh, it absolutely does. It immerses you in Alex's world, yes. But it also creates distance. You're sort of struggling to translate the words. And that mental friction can actually filter the sheer brutality of what he's describing.
So it makes the violence feel alien.
A little bit, yeah. It prevents you from fully, let's say, luxuriating in the horror, which is actually a common complaint about the Kubrick film adaptation.
Right. That mix of philosophy and brutal style is exactly why, if you look online, opinions are so divided. Let's get into what readers on Reddit and Goodreads are saying, because it really does fall into 2 very clear camps.
The first camp, they see this book as a philosophical masterpiece. This is the group that's really focused on the themes of free will and enforced morality.
They see it as this profound critique of government overreach, of totalitarianism. They focus on the horror of turning a person, even a monster like Alex, into what they call a well-wound toy soldier for the state.
And that's the strength of their argument. But a weakness that critics point out is that this hyper-focus on choice. It can sometimes be read as accidentally justifying Alex's initial violence.
Yeah.
Prioritizing choice above all else.
Even human safety.
Right.
Then you've got the second camp. The opinion focused almost entirely on the reading experience itself, the repulsive style.
Yeah, for a lot of new readers, they just find the NADSAT confusing. They feel the violence is excessive, repulsive, maybe even gratuitous. It can be a real barrier. They feel like they're spending all their time just translating the text.
And this group, it's interesting, they often compare it to Kubrick's film. They'll say that the film sometimes makes the violence even more stylized, almost appealing, which complicates things even more.
Exactly. The book's style acts as a filter, but for some, the film style almost glorifies it. But here's the thing. Let's connect these two camps. They're not totally separate.
Okay.
Both camps really agree on the book's power and its depth. One is just focused on the social and ethical content, while the other is focused on the literary style and emotional impact. One says, this book changed how I think, and the other says, this book was a real challenge, but I can't deny its power.
That's a great synthesis. It's a difficult read by design, so to really get the stakes here, we should probably trace Alex's journey through that three-part structure.
That's the best way to do it. Let's start with part 1. Chapters 1 through 7. This is where we see his life of violence and his inevitable failure.
This is where we meet his gang, his droogs, Pete, Georgie, and Dim. They're at the Korova milk bar drinking drugged milk before they go out for a bit of the old ultra-violence.
And the crimes are specific and they're brutal. They beat an old man, they rob a shop, but the most crucial one is the attack on the writer F. Alexander's cottage. They assault his wife, and they literally tear up the manuscript for a book that's also titled A Clockwork Orange.
Wait, hold on. So Burgess wrote a novel where the main character literally destroys the physical manuscript of the book we're reading. That's more than just meta.
Oh, yeah. Is Burgess basically saying that Alex's chaos threatens to consume the very critique he represents? But the real contradiction that defines Alex is his private life. He's obsessed with classical music, Mozart, Bach, and especially Beethoven. He calls it glorious.
It's so hard to square that circle. A guy who loves Beethoven is also beating an old man. It just feels pathological.
It's the total separation of beauty and morality. He appreciates the art, but it does nothing to temper his cruelty. Anyway, part 1 ends when his own gang turns on him. Georgie rebels, there's a fight, and later, Alex is betrayed by Dim and gets arrested. He's beaten by the police, gets a 14-year sentence.
And in prison, he adapts. He reads the Bible, but not for spiritual reasons.
No, he just enjoys the old violence in the Old Testament. And that's when he learns about the Ludovico technique.
Which brings us right into part 2, chapters 8 to 14, conditioning and isolation.
Right. Alex is looking for any way out, and after he's blamed for the death of another prisoner, he becomes this perfect political pawn. The Minister of the Interior selects him for the treatment.
Even though the prison chaplain warns him, right? Says it's morally bankrupt.
Profoundly, yes. But Alex goes for it. He's transferred, and this Dr. Branham oversees the therapy. And you have to picture it. He's strapped to a chair, eyelids clipped open, forced to watch horrific violence while being given a drug that makes him incredibly sick.
It's Pavlov's dog, but just weaponized for humans.
It's that simple. Pair violence with sickness until the very thought of it makes you physically ill. He's being programmed.
But the sources all emphasize this huge unintended side effect, the music.
That's the real horror for Alex. His greatest pleasure, Beethoven, is played during the films. So it becomes a trigger for pain. His love for art, the one thing that made him unique, is weaponized against him.
That's devastating. So the state didn't just take away his choice to be violent, they took his ability to enjoy beauty, and the public demonstration of his cure is just humiliating.
It's the moment he becomes the Clockwork Orange. He's forced to lick a man's shoe, he can't defend himself without getting violently ill, and this is where he shouts that famous line, "Am I just a Clockwork Orange?" He knows what's been done to him.
And once he's released, everything just falls apart. His parents have rented out his room, they reject him, and he's immediately assaulted by his old enemies.
And the worst part is, he gets beaten by 2 policemen who turn out to be his old gang members, Dim and Billy Boy, the ultimate irony. They now work for the state.
He ends up at F. Alexander's house, the writer he attacked, but the music. It triggers the sickness, and he tries to kill himself by jumping out a window.
A total low point. Which brings us to the part so many readers missed for decades. Part 3, political exploitation, and finally, maturity.
The theme shifts completely here, from conditioning to how the state uses him.
Exactly. Alex survives, and the doctors reverse the treatment. Not because it's the right thing to do, but because the government is worried about bad press after his suicide attempt. They need to cover their tracks.
And the minister himself shows up. This is pure temptation, isn't it? He offers Alex a good job, a new stereo, basically tempting him back to his old life to prove the conditioning failed.
And at first, Alex gives in. He gets a new gang, he commits more violence. But then, and this is the turning point that's only in the full version, he just grows tired of it. The thrill is gone.
And that's when he runs into his old droog, Pete.
Right. And Pete is married. He's living a quiet, normal adult life. He's talking about mortgages. And for Alex, it's like a switch flips. He sees this whole life cycle laid out in front of him, and his youthful violence just seems shallow.
He's 18 now, and he starts thinking about marriage, about kids.
And the full version ends with him choosing adulthood. He rejects violence not because he was forced to, but because he's just tired. He voluntarily chooses maturity.
That voluntary weariness, that personal choice, that's the entire point that was erased from the American version. It puts free will right back at the center of the story.
So when you look at the whole journey, you see those two critical lenses. You can read it as this powerful philosophical critique of totalitarianism.
The argument for free will above all.
Yeah.
Or you can see it as this stylistically difficult work that uses language to force you to confront brutality in a very specific, indirect way.
And that leads us to the final thought for you to chew on. If Burgess used that full version to argue that real moral transformation has to be a personal choice, Alex choosing maturity because he was tired of it all, not because he was conditioned, what does that say about punishment and rehabilitation in our own society?
If forced obedience doesn't have true value, does that mean all lasting moral change has to come from inside, from self-realization, and never from the outside? That's the challenge A Clockwork Orange leaves us with.